Tomatoes, you love them so much. Why not save them for next year so you don't have to pay the store to get some plants and do it yourself? In this video, I'm going to show you how simple it is to save your tomato seeds. Okay, for your tomato plants, we all love tomatoes. I don't know about you, but there's such a special affinity with tomatoes that I love growing them each and every year. There are so many different varieties of tomato plants out there that I don't even know how many exist out there. There's been countless books on it. There seems to be a movement of tomato lovers and tomato growers out there. One thing I love about tomatoes is that there's so many different varieties of them out there that you can grow as a ton of them, and just different varieties each year, and you may never get through your different collections that you do have. So I have a very large collection of tomato seeds. I don't get to grow all of them each year, so I will try to grow as many as I can. But one of the great things about tomato seeds is they do last for quite some time. I'm not sure if there's an actual date that I would say, but I've had seeds for about 10 years and they have still grown. In fact, a lot of the plants that I had this year, they were at least 10 years old for some of the seeds. And I primarily grew them to make sure that I can continue growing the seeds, and they were also good varieties of tomato plants that I want to grow. So I just grabbed a few different ones that I'm going to save the seeds for. This one's a black tomato. These are kind of my little ugly, what I call the ugly ones that I like to use for the seeds. They've grown out and they've fully matured, but they might not be as edible as some of the ones I've already picked. And this one is actually a green zebra. This one's still edible. The great thing about saving the seeds from tomatoes is that you can save the seeds and you can still eat it, because some of the vegetables that you have to save the seeds for, you might decimate it by the time you get all the seeds out there. So that's another good thing about this. I mean, I could at least throw this in a salsa or just make some kind of tomato juice out of it if I really wanted to after I get the seeds out. So let me show you exactly some of the things that I recommend that you use when you're getting the seeds out there for you to help you get prepared. All right, so here's some of the supplies that I recommend that you use, and you don't have to necessarily use all these particular supplies, but you definitely want to have, at the end when the seeds are dried out, you want to have something to store the seeds in. I prefer these coin envelopes. They're very inexpensive, they are breathable, and they also kind of keep most of the light out, and you can write on them as well. You can use anything from a plastic Ziploc bag or some type of glass container or plastic container that you're able to do it. But you want to ensure that you're writing the name of the variety on there, especially for tomatoes where you have so many different varieties out there, and as you collect them over the years you may have so many of them. So you want to write the name of the variety on there, maybe a little bit of fact, like if it's an indeterminate, you want to maybe put that on there, the year that you saved the seeds, and just any other notes that you think will help you out with it if you're not really familiar with it. So that's one thing. And the other thing, you know, is a knife. And what I like to do is the stages that I save my seeds in, I kind of let them, I guess, sit basically in their juice, and they kind of ferment in there, and that kills off a lot of different viruses that could be on there. So what I use is I just use a simple glass jar if you have some other container that you want to use, and then I make sure I label those as well, because once you have all these jars out, you want to make sure you know which one is which. The other thing that I would recommend is also a coffee filter and maybe a paper plate. You can also use paper towels or just something, because when you get to that stage where you're drying out the tomato plants, the tomato seeds, you want to ensure that they don't stick. And sometimes on the paper towels they do stick. If you don't have that, it's fine. Just be aware that some of the seeds might stick, and you might have to rub them off as they get a little bit drier to make sure they don't stick on there. All right, well, let's get started with it. All right, so I'm gonna save this black. This is a black tomato. These things are wonderful. If you've never had these before, their taste is phenomenal. In fact, this knife is really not that sharp there. Most people think that the outside is what is black, but let me cut this open and you can see what I'm talking about. The inside is much darker. That's where it gets the name from. Is the inside of it is a little bit almost like dark. But these have a wonderful taste. I didn't get a lot of them this year because of the weather, and I planted these late, and they just didn't really flower as much because of the extreme heat that we had in North Carolina this season. But I did have enough to save the seeds. I did have enough to put in my salad, so I'm pretty satisfied with what I got. And these seeds. I think these were actually 12 years old when I planted this plant back in the spring. So what I do is I just cut it open, and I just scoop out and I kind of scrape out as much as I can of the pulp. And it's okay if you don't get all the pulp out of it, because I'll show you in the next step what you do for that. So we're gonna get, in some tomatoes you'll find that they won't have a lot of seeds. So just be aware of that. If you're not really sure, then it's best to at least have a few different ones. Now, the bigger ones are gonna have a little bit more seeds, obviously, because they're bigger. And then the cherry tomatoes are gonna have less seeds. When you're saving these, you wanna make sure you have enough in here for what you would grow for the next year. It's always better to have more than you need, because sometimes the plants may not germinate, the seeds might not germinate. Having a bit more is kind of like insurance for you. Now, if you were to, if this is one, I'm not really going to save this one, this is going to go in the compost pile, but, you could just make salsa out of this or something if you really wanted to, because all you need is the stuff on the side. So we'll do this other one as well. Now you can see it's almost like a black in here, but this is just because it's really overripe. But as you can see, it's really dark, and that's why it's a black tomato. Very good taste too. So for the most part, I got all the seeds out that are pretty much in these two plants. The next step, what I would do is I would want to scoop this up, and I want to put this in this jar right here. And I probably should have just squeezed it into the jar. So maybe you can do that, save this extra step right here. And I wanted to show you over the cutting board anyways, just because it's a little messy. You get to see a little bit more than just me throwing it into the jar. So you want to get all of them in there, as many as you can in here. Now, if you're doing more than one plant, more than one tomato plant, you want to make sure that you kind of do this individually so you don't get any of the seeds mixed up. So as you can see, there is a good amount of liquid in there. Sometimes you may, what I would do for this one, I'm just going to leave it the way it is, but sometimes you might not have a lot of liquid in there, so you might have to add just a little bit of water in there, just so they don't stick to the bottom. And then what I do is I just cover this up, and then I'm going to label this. So I'm going to label this black tomato. And this will ensure that I don't get these mixed up. All right, so I'm gonna label this. And as you can see, I got everything all labeled and ready to go. So at this point, what I would do is leave this out in a kind of warm area. I mean, you can leave it outside for a day or two, but what you're looking for is when you open the jar up, it is gonna smell really bad. And usually it only takes a few days. If you have it indoors, it might take a little bit longer. But if you put it outside and it's warm out, then it might only take a day or two. But you just want to make sure that it's fermenting, and it's basically going to get rid of it. It's killing off all the different microbes in there. So I did, planning for the video, I did have one that I already did. These are my Roma ones, so I'm going to show you the next step at this point. But like I said, you want to wait a few days before you do this. And the way that you know, and I know you can't smell it, but oof. You could smell that, you would know that that was done. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill the jar up with water, And what I'm doing is I'm going to be pouring out the seeds so that the water becomes clear. And some of the seeds are going to float to the top, or maybe there's some other gook in here from the pulp of it. And what that is that the seeds that are floating are the ones that you don't even want, because those are not viable. So, so what I'll do is I might fill this up, dump out the water, fill it up, dump out the water until it's pretty much clear, and all I see is mostly seeds at the bottom. So I'll show you what that looks like at that point. All right, so I've rinsed the seeds out a bunch of times. So as I said, you're pouring water in here and then you're just dumping out the water, but you want to try to keep the main seeds down at the bottom. So you just keep filling it up, and eventually it's gonna, most of the junk is gonna be out of there, all the pulp in there. You can really see it in here from the camera, but you'll notice that the seeds are pretty much clean. There might be a few little scraps here and there, but at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this through a strainer, and then I'm going to I'll bring the strainer over and I'll show you what I do at that step. All right, as you can see, all I did was I put them through the strainer, and I just rinsed them off a little bit. There might be still a little bit of pulp inside, but for the most part, these are fairly clean, and they're ready to go. So at this point, I'm going to dump them onto, I'm going to show you over here. So I'm going to dump them onto the paper towel as best as I can. Let me try. Now some of these seeds are going to be really small, so you got to be careful with get them all on here. In fact, sometimes you just use your finger and rub them on here, because they might stick. They'll stick to it. Now, like I said, some tomato plants are not going to have a lot of seeds, so you want to do your best to get as many of them onto the towel as possible, so that you have a good chance. It's always better to have more than enough seeds than you need, because it is insurance. Because sometimes the seeds don't germinate quite well. Alright, so as you can see, I have all the seeds on the paper towel, and what I try to do is I try to, as best I can, to keep them separated, because they might be clumped up if they were attached to another piece of the pulp. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I write on my little envelope what type of seeds these are, and these are actually Roma cherry tomatoes. These were fantastic tomatoes. They do very, very well in my area. I just grew them the first time this year. I had these seeds for, I think, over 10 years. These were my older seeds that I had that I didn't have a chance to grow them. So I wanted to grow them just so I can make sure I can get more seeds, and also to just try them out, because this is the first time I've had this one. And these have done fantastic in my heat. We had just very crazy weather this year. So these things are champs. I would definitely grow these again next year. I'm going to, so I'm so glad that these came out really well. So at this point, what you want to do is these are going to dry for about 7 to 10 days, maybe a little bit less, depending on the area they have everything growing in. And then once they're completely dry, you want to just put them in your envelope and then store them away in a cool, dark place that is away from moisture. A basement's usually good. That's where I put all my seeds, and they're in a container, and they're basically out of the light for that. So that's really it for saving tomato seeds. I also have a series of seed saving. I'll post a link right above, and that is just I have different vegetables, different herbs, all other types of plants that I do save seeds for. So if you're curious about what the process is for other seeds, you can take a look at that playlist above. But first, also, if you could, please give us a green thumbs up. Let us know that we're making great video for you. Also, hit the subscribe button down below so that you get notified of any new videos that we do have. We do also have a website called gardenerthumb.com, where we have lots of tips, tricks, hacks, all that other good stuff that you can find out there as well. Well, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.